Great. Can we have the welcoming video, please? Again, to those of you joining us here in this room and online, I'm Kara Siahaan. I'm the head of the Anticipation Hub. The Anticipation Hub is a platform for knowledge exchange, learning guidance, advocacy on anticipatory action. We are an initiative of the German Red Cross, the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Cross Societies, and also the Red Crescent Climate Center. And we have the support now of 113 partners from the UN, from NGOs, government, think tank, and academia, and very happy also to see many of those familiar faces here. It's really a pleasure for us to be publishing this report that really try to capture the progress of implementation of anticipatory action worldwide, and not only by one agency, but all the main agencies that are implementing anticipatory action worldwide. We are also very pleased to be joined by our partners here supporting the launch, and also contributed to the content of the report, which is FAO, WFP, OCHA, Start Network, Welthungerhilfe. And I'm also very pleased to be co-hosting this event with the German Federal Foreign Office. So why anticipatory action? I'm sure that throughout the different sessions that you have attended, and of course through our work, we know that disasters are increasing, and we know also most of the disasters are predictable. We have increasing accuracy now, predictability on forecasts and analytics, yet we are not doing enough, not enough resources is being put on anticipatory action. And we'll hear more also the insights from our colleagues joining us from OCHA, from ASEAN, from IFRC, from SKS, and also from EGAT, Climate Prediction Center. So within the purpose of this report, what we called anticipatory action is that those actions that are taken to reduce the impacts of a forecast hazards before it occurs or before its most acute impacts are felt. Anticipatory action takes different forms and happens on a range of scales depending on the mandate of the organization involved and the context of where people live. And we have as the main organizations implementing anticipatory action, what we call the parameters. The objective is to reduce the potential impact of those forecastable hazards. The actions are designed based on forecasts or predictive analysis of when and where a hazard are implemented before a hazard's impact or before its most acute impacts are felt. Anticipatory action based on our experience, our collective experience, is best if the following core components are pre-agreed by stakeholder in advance, the actions to be taken and the specific roles of each stakeholder, the forecast for that hazard and the threshold levels that are used to trigger the resources or the financing, and of course the financing with the amount, the source, and also the actions to be implemented pre-arranged. So this is the scope of the report. Again, with so much progress now, with the increasing predictability, anticipatory action is no longer just a humanitarian innovation, it is an obligation. So I hope that this report can also demonstrate those progress, those challenges. And before I invite our co-host to deliver her welcoming remarks, I would maybe ask the audience to be engaged, I'm curious how optimistic or pessimistic you are on anticipatory action. So can we open the Mentimeter, Hila? Okay, so go to menti.com. The number is 6780929. We have 3 questions for you. How many countries, how many anticipatory action frameworks were in place in 2022? What hazard is covered the most by anticipatory action? And in how many countries are anticipatory action frameworks currently being implemented? I will not show the result immediately, but I would like to invite then Mrs. Susanne Fries-Dyer, Director of Humanitarian Assistance from the German Federal Foreign Office, who is connecting to this session remotely. Over to you.
Thank you, Cara. First of all, the usual question, can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends of Anticipatory Action. So I would like to start by thanking the Anticipation Hub for drafting this report and for bringing us together here. So you in Geneva and all of us virtually. So as most of you know, Germany is a huge supporter and promoter of anticipatory action, and because we believe that it really works. So recently, a 34-year-old woman from Rangpur in Bangladesh told us how anticipatory action helped her. She said that during one of the recent floodings, it was very hard to buy food, and if available at all, it was very expensive. But because she had received money before the flooding hit her home, she had already bought rice, eggs, milk, and other things for herself and the children, and so they could survive the crisis. And this is just one example which stands for many. And of course, it is not just more dignified, it is also much less expensive. WFP has recently shared that anticipatory investments in Bangladesh and Nepal have reduced the cost of humanitarian responses to floods by up to 50%. And we need such concrete examples and research if we want to convince others to invest more in anticipatory action. And the report, which will be launched today, serves exactly that purpose. The first ever launch of such a report also shows that the prominent role anticipatory action plays today is very important, and it is much more prominent than some years ago. So this is also a sign of commitment, not only by the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, but also by all humanitarian organizations, donors, and academia who are working with the Anticipation Hub. And as this report shows, more and more organizations are implementing anticipatory action. And also regional actors, such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or the African Union, showing interest in the instrument. By now, 70 pilot projects and action frameworks are in place, with many more in the making. However, to achieve a real paradigm shift from reaction to prevention, we have to scale up. So how do we do this, and how do we get there? I would like to mention 4 quick points. So my first point, of course, we need more reliable and flexible funding in order to move from piloting to mainstreaming. And Germany has already committed itself to use at least 5% of our overall humanitarian budget for anticipatory action. And we are glad that also the Central Emergency Response Fund will set aside a certain percentage for anticipatory action. However, it is not only about funding, which brings me to my second point. To guarantee that humanitarian money is spent early, but also in an effective way, We need reliable data to predict a crisis. Interaction between data providers and humanitarian actors is therefore of the essence. Germany funds inter alia the complex risk analytic fund, which is called CRAFT, but there are also other important instruments in this regard. My third point, it is important to be precise on the definition of anticipatory action as a humanitarian instrument. An important reference point in this regard is last year's G7 Foreign Ministers statement, which identifies three crucial components: trigger-based early warning systems, pre-arranged financing, and pre-arranged actions. However, and this is my last point, it is important to closely work with other actors in the field of prevention, with the development actors who, for example, finance early warning systems, but also with the climate actors. So let us be conceptually clear, but at the same time, look for synergies. And my last advertising words, if you are not yet a supporter of anticipatory action, I hope that you will join us in this endeavor. And please do also become a partner of the Anticipation Hub. It's an excellent platform for knowledge sharing. So we all have the means to make our humanitarian system more effective and dignified. So let's use them. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to this event. Back to you, Kara.
Thank you so much for the brilliant remarks, and again for Germany's commitment to support and also call for action for anticipatory action. I will call now my colleague Nicolas Serra, the program manager for policy and advocacy at the Anticipation Hub, also co-author of this report together with me and Tim Woods, who's sitting in the audience. Please come, Nico, and share with us the summary of the report.
Thank you very much, Kara. Let me get up the slide. Yes. So anticipatory action has gained increasingly policy relevance, not only, but especially, of course, in the humanitarian circles. So yesterday I counted just 17 sessions on anticipatory action here at HNPW. But while we have, this, or while anticipatory action has gained this prominence, we still lack a comprehensive picture of the extent of the actual practical implementation.
Sorry, actually, we forgot about the results of the Mentimeter. So
No, they're coming. They're coming. At the global level, and to address this gap, so the scale of anticipatory action, providing a robust empirical picture of the scale is basically the purpose of this report. Let me also say that we plan this to be an annual report, so that we can really track also the changes over time to see how this space is evolving in terms of, the scale and reach and technical progress. This first edition now draws upon a desk research that we conducted last year to map the anticipatory action frameworks and activations worldwide. And the data was then verified and updated by 15 organizations that are active in the space. Again, a big thank you to OCHA, FAO, WFP, the IFRC, Start Network, and Welthungerhilfe, who supported us with the data collection. But before we deep dive now, I want to know, what do you think of the scale of anticipatory action? So if we can get up the Menti results here, that would be wonderful. Move here. So what do you think? How many anticipatory action frameworks were under? Yeah, it's also a good one. We were in place in 2022. 46. It's what the majority thinks. Okay, interesting. Create a bit of excitement, right? Next slide, please. What hazard is covered the most? Flood. Okay, great. Majority thinks flood. Is it flood? We'll figure out in a few seconds. And how many anticipatory action frameworks were under development last year? Numbers still changing. Okay. Not clear. Most think 53. Okay. Now we will solve the riddle. Okay, next slide of the presentation. can get up the map that shows the frameworks that were active last year. Yeah, okay. I think I need to click the next slide, right? Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay. So we had actually 70 frameworks in place last year in 35 countries. And the map here shows basically, the 35 countries in which the frameworks were in place. And if you look at the geographical distribution, you can basically see that we had we had 20 frameworks in place in Africa, 9 in Asia, and 6 in Central and South America. The frameworks covered basically 11 different types of hazards, ranging from cold wave over extreme rainfall to rain and river and flood and others. And the report, of course, you can see the key a bit more detailed. And somehow, I don't know. Okay, here we go. And through these 70 frameworks in place globally, 7.6 million people were better prepared to act ahead of the predictable impact of hazards and able to recover more quickly. And the financing committed through these frameworks in 2022 reached, according to our numbers, $138 million US dollars. As this is our baseline data, we cannot say if this is an increase or decline. That's hope, but we want to track, or that's what we want to track, what we will track now over time, beginning with this report. Now, this figure here basically shows also the distribution by hazard. So I think your guess was flood. The answer is it's actually drought. So the data shows that most frameworks covered drought, followed by river and flood, 16 frameworks, and tropical storm, where we counted 9 frameworks. This is then followed by rain flood, heat wave, cold wave, dry spell, disease outbreak, extreme rainfall, landslide, and volcanic ashfall. So also a great diversity there as well. We also wanted to know basically who is doing what, like which humanitarian organizations are covering which hazard. And we distinguished here by UN agencies, the IFRC network, and NGOs organized in the START network. And the figure basically here shows that the UN agency have a clear focus on drought, which can also be explained by the specific mandate of FAO and WFP. The IFRC network focuses more on to-date river and flood and tropical storms, while NGOs have in turn their biggest focus on drought. Details to all of this framework, the hazards, the number of people targeted, the implementing and funding organization can all be found in the annex of the report. And please also to say that, I mean, this is really a minimum estimate. So we're also aware that there's a growing number of locally led anticipatory action initiatives, where local stakeholders basically act on the basis of a forecast, using funds or, not using funds, but basically outside of the typical, project-based structure. And to the informal nature also of this, we couldn't count them, but still they exist. So please take this as a minimum estimate. Now, when we look at the activations last year, one more slide. That's not the right slide. Sorry. Okay, brilliant. So we had basically 47 activation last year, and here you can see the map and then basically the geographical breakdown. There were 24 activations in Africa, 15 in Asia, 6 in Central America, and 2 in the MENA region. And again, also here in the report, you will find a detailed table of all the activations, including the date, the hazard, even the number of people reached by each activation, available funding, implementing organization. So this is really just a start, and you can basically also download the data on the Anticipation Hub website, so you can basically do your own analysis. And to give you a quick summary, of the activations. So here, you can basically see that through these 47 activations, we could, you know, as a sector, when you want to say, reach basically 3.6 million people. Funding of $53 million was triggered. At least 56 organizations were also involved in implementing these activities. So this is really a broad constituency. And the activations took place ahead of 15 types of hazards. How does an activation look like in practice? Here we're going to show you a video from an activation last year in Honduras. We can get this video up. That would be fantastic. Is it working? Yeah, all good. We have time. There's also a lot of information, a lot of fingers, a lot of numbers to digest. So you can note down your questions already. Okay, here we go.
En zonas vulnerables de Centroamérica. El 8 de octubre del 2022, la Cruz Roja hondureña activó su plan de acción temprana ante inundaciones asociadas a tormentas tropicales.
Sí, si bien es cierto, la Cruz Roja hondureña a través de todo el desarrollo de esta monitoreo constante que se ha tenido a través de la tormenta tropical Julia, mediante la activación de su Centro Nacional de Monitoreo, nos ha permitido de alguna forma poder tomar algunas decisiones respecto a llegar a lugares que tenían la probabilidad de ocurrencia de inundación, ¿no? Sobre todo.
Dentro de las acciones tempranas lideradas por la Cruz Roja hondureña, se entregaron más de 1.600 kits de agua y saneamiento, se distribuyó agua segura, y más de 600 familias recibieron transferencias monetarias multipropósito en comunidades afectadas en el Valle de Sula.
Es que la primera necesidad básica de la población, ya sea durante una emergencia o normal, es el agua. Recordemos que la población tiene que tener acceso directamente al agua. Las acciones tempranas por parte de Cruz Roja hondureña es para que la población sea más resiliente.
Cruz Roja es la única organización por los momentos que nos ha venido a apoyar con el agua potable.
Yo le agradezco mucho a la Cruz Roja porque es una gran obra que están haciendo, una gran labor, ayudar a la gente, ayudarlos. Ellos no tenemos nada para comer.
Porque cuando viene la Cruz Roja uno se siente como cuando uno está un palo que ya se cae y viene la Cruz Roja se siente que parece que le han aporcado con tierra. Se siente más diferente porque lo apoyan a uno también.
Nosotros estamos ayudándole a la comunidad a actuar de forma temprana. Y pues para mí es un orgullo, un honor de que Cruz Roja siempre esté brindándole ayudas a todas las personas de las comunidades.
Brilliant. Perfect. We can bring back the presentation. So this was one of the 47 activations that took place last year. Now, working in anticipatory action film, we love space. We love, of course, forecasts. We love to look into the future. So I want to give you an outlook, or the report also provides an outlook of the anticipatory action protocols being under development. And here you can see the map. So your guess was, I think, 56 or so. Actual number is indeed 97 frameworks. So there are 97 frameworks currently under development. And when you look at the geographical distribution, you can see that a great deal of the anticipatory action protocols are currently being developed in Africa and Asia with 32 and 31 frameworks. In Central and South America, also comes close with 28, followed also by the MENA region with the 6 frameworks under development. Now, of these 97 anticipatory action frameworks under development, so it's a bit of a delay here. Yeah, okay. 51 frameworks began the process in 2022. That means basically also that, in 61 countries, anticipatory action frameworks are under development, and in 26 of these, this is really also the first time. That brings me also then to the key finding, basically, of this report, which is that anticipatory action, here we go, a growing and global approach. We have done in total 167 frameworks for 15 different hazard types active or under development. I didn't go into that yet, but alongside them providing evidence of the current scale of the practical implementation of anticipatory action, the report also captures major milestone in 2022, like the policy developments at the global and regional level, new research and evidence, technological progress and thematic progress, for instance, how to link AA and risk financing or make use of Earth observation and so on. And another key insight of this part is that we see also significant progress on institutionalizing anticipatory action, especially at the regional level. Mrs. Zanafriskaya mentioned this G7 declaration. There's an Asian framework. ICPAC, for instance, is also working on a roadmap for anticipatory action. We also do see greater in-country and inter-agency coordinations, referring here, for instance, activations led by in Niger and Nepal, led by OJA. We also see increased effort to expand anticipatory action to other risks and hazards. I use this. There are also some gaps, and it's also true that anticipatory action has not reached scale. Of course, we didn't expect it, but I mean, despite proven potential, the coverage is still fairly low. Available funding for anticipatory action is also still limited. So we can basically see that the growing interest has not yet led to a systemic shift in funding. And many of the anticipatory action frameworks are still rather small scale and fragmented, although we do see the progress here. And still a big challenge is access to funding and relevant forecast, observational impact data to local or national actors. In other words, a comprehensive scale-up effort will be needed, and how we can address this is a question where the report also provides some top-line recommendation. But here I stop and leave these questions now to the panel. Kara, over to you. Thanks for your attention.
Great, thank you, Nico. And I'm very pleased to see a mix of optimism and maybe a good pessimism that we are informed through the report. And again, just to highlight, I started working on anticipatory action in 2016, and it never occurred to me that the progress would happen so fast and so quick. And this is largely to the collaborative approach that the different organizations are taking up. And therefore, I'm very pleased to be joined by organizations that are collaborating on anticipatory action. I have to my left Dr. Rianti Jalante, Assistant Director from the Disaster Management Division of the ASEAN Secretariat. And we also have Mr. Imrul Case from SKS Bangladesh. And we have Caroline Holt, Director of Disaster and Crisis from the IFRC. And we have Dr. Ahmed Ambihun from the IGAT Climate Prediction Center, Program Coordinator. We also are joined by Lisa Doughton, Director of Humanitarian Finance and Partnership of UN OCHA. Unfortunately, Lisa has to leave, so we will ask Lisa the two questions. So really in this panel discussion, what we would like to ask for our panelists to reflect is on the findings of the report and of course the recommendations that we have across more learning and evidence, more coordinated approach to developing anticipatory action frameworks, involving more local actors in planning, learning, and development, increase support to efforts to integrate anticipatory action across national, local policies and frameworks, and also incentivizing greater collaboration between development, humanitarian, and climate programs, very briefly. So again, a combination of reflection and outlook for the organization. Lisa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me as well?
Yes, excellent. So Lisa, I will head on to the two questions that we have for you. Again, reflecting on the report, when it comes to scale, OCHA is leading in number of people reached and financing released, but critiques would argue that still nowhere compared to the humanitarian needs that we are facing today. So what can OCHA draw from the overview reports with regard to scale particularly? And what are the key lessons from OCHA's coordinated approach, and how could such approach concretely help accelerate the scaling up of anticipatory action?
Great. Thank you so much, Kara. And it's a pleasure to be here, even virtually. And I wanted to issue a huge thanks to the Anticipation Hub for the Anticipatory Action Task Force and the German Federal Foreign Office for organizing this session. So first, let me say it was really the UN agencies and their NGO, Red Cross, and government partners who've reached over 3.5 million people. And it's been our privilege as OCHA to bring together for AA, to bring all these people together for the AA frameworks and to get SERP involved and help make these collective achievements possible. As the global overview shows, 2022 was a significant year in many ways for anticipatory action, and the community expanded the portfolio of regions and countries covered by anticipatory approaches and has introduced new trigger models predicting the onset or deterioration of new shocks, such as disease outbreaks. The overview also showcases new evidence that anticipatory action offers timely, impactful, and cost-effective assistance to people affected by predictable crises. As well, community has contributed to the development of new policy instruments that will help institutionalize and advance anticipatory action at the global, national, and local level. So also notice the report shows that we've gotten better at bringing different organizations together and coordinating our efforts on the ground in order to best assist vulnerable people. And as we did, for example, in South Sudan, Nepal, and Niger, where UN agencies, government, NGOs, and Red Cross work together. Now, at the same time, it's important that we manage expectations and we keep in mind that anticipatory action will not resolve all humanitarian crises entirely. It will not make hazards disappear, as we know. It won't solve conflict, and it's not going to stop climate change. But anticipatory action is a relatively new tool in the toolbox. And this doesn't mean that other tools like preparedness and approaches or traditional responses are obsolete. But on the contrary, they complement each other, and we can use this approach when it's the most suitable. For example, in South Sudan, even in a setting where conflict and displacement prevail, we saw the benefits of taking an anticipatory approach last year. $19 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund, the SURF, and from the country-based pooled fund, the CBPF, helped avert a public health crisis by providing assistance 6 months earlier than usual. And anticipatory action is well suited for more than 20% of predictable hazards that turn into predictable humanitarian problems. In fact, we estimate that up to 34% of SURF's rapid response window has the potential to be spent using more anticipatory approaches. So if we can even do 20% or even 30% better on the $51.5 billion of requirements, humanitarian requirements for this year, that's already a huge step forward. So unfortunately, there's not enough funding yet, as been mentioned, for anticipatory action. A 2022 study by REAP that's also featured in the overview report highlights that despite the recent shifts toward more anticipatory action, the commensurate shift in funding flows has not yet happened. And funding is fragmented and not always coherent between what people call the build and fuel money. At OCHA, we're looking to intensify our efforts to promote greater coherence in that direction. And you'd also asked about the key lessons learned. So maybe just to go straight into that, report demonstrates our progress in learning how to apply anticipatory action to predictable crises. And this is a big improvement over how we used to think about humanitarian action. Now we have to scale that up and optimize the approach to reduce humanitarian needs. But we really just shouldn't make any mistake and really don't think that this is an easy thing. The road to making anticipatory action work is not always, has been, and nor will it always be smooth sailing. We have to find new solutions to technical issues. So we had like designing the best triggers with limited data. How do we work best and strengthen existing capacities? And how do we communicate the benefits of anticipatory approach? And we have to shift the mindset of how we provide humanitarian assistance in general in capitals around the world as well as in the field. So over the next 4 years, we commit to support and facilitate a systemic shift to coherent embedded anticipatory approaches. And we plan to operationalize this across 4 pillars based on the lessons we've learned during the last 4 years. So first, more anticipatory action. We want to improve existing pilots and grow the portfolio to reach more people in more countries, covering more hazards. And a key element here is strengthening coordination and consolidating activities by different partners that focus on the same shocks in the same country. In Bangladesh and Niger are examples of this, where we helped further improve trigger mechanisms already set up by the AATF and government partners. And we brought in more finance and additional agencies for a collective multi-sectoral approach to reach more people. Secondly is mainstreaming. So this means integrating it within the humanitarian program cycle, as was decided by the Interagency Standing Committee in January. It also means flexible access to OCHA managed pooled funds based on risks in a standardized and simplified manner for early action. OCHA will also work to institutionalize anticipatory approaches at the national level. Mainstreaming also means OCHA will provide technical support for the development of anticipatory action frameworks, including predictive analytics, supporting the humanitarian country teams, which enable better decision-making considering dynamic risk. For example, we've collaborated with the Resident Coordinator's Office, UNICEF, WHO, and national authorities in DRC to develop a cholera data monitoring framework, which allows partners to respond quickly to small clusters of cases before they become a major outbreak. And mainstreaming also requires promoting our local partners. Last year in South Sudan, Niger, and Nepal, more than 50 NGO, government, and Red Cross partners engaged in implementation of AA funding from SURF. Third, financing. We continue to advocate for more flexible, coordinated finance, including through humanitarian pooled funds, and we'll make more use of OCHA managed pooled funds in which co-financing will increasingly become a requirement for collective frameworks. And lastly, fostering partnerships beyond the humanitarian system. And here we want to promote, align, and support the anticipatory approach with the development community, especially with the international financial institutions, the IFIs, which I would highlight the example of the ongoing collaboration with the World Bank's Early Response Facility. We're also engaging with the climate community, where anticipatory action for disasters is a natural fit. So one place this is coming together nicely is in the Secretary General's Early Warning for All initiative, as one concrete example. So these steps, which are closely aligned with the recommendations outlined in the global overview, can really help broaden the donor base for anticipatory action, widening the scope of hazards, coordinating the efforts of organizations, and effectively increasing the number of people that are covered by anticipatory approaches. Having a problem with that word today. So back to you, Kara, and thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Lisa, and I hope you're still in time for your meeting. And thank you for sharing OCHA's highlighting really the coordinated approach and its benefit, and also really mentioning that anticipatory action is an important tool, but it's one of the tools in the box of comprehensive risk management. I will now turn to Caroline Holt, Director of IFRC. It would be really good to hear your commentary on the report, Caroline, but specifically it's great progress that we see 27 national societies across regions implementing that. So how are IFRC and in that enabling national societies local action in anticipatory action?
Thank you, Kara. And first of all, congratulations on the report to you, to the Hub, and to everyone, of course, that's been involved. I think it's a real milestone and it's a real important step. It provides us with sort of concrete, informative action and information. And it really complements existing findings and works with the community as a whole. You know, if we look at the REAP Finance for Anticipatory Action report, there's a lot of complementary comments in there as well. So I think it's great news on one part, and then on the other part, it really does highlight that there's still a lot of work to be done, and we really need to make sure that we're really increasing the number of countries and the number of hazards covered by anticipatory approaches. So I sit here today, of course, with the IFRC representing 192 national societies globally. As you mentioned, the report mentions 27 of them. And I can talk very easily about national societies, of course. I can talk about the importance of local action, and I'm sure that everyone here will be mentioning that. But the fact that we're present, all of us, in local communities before, during, and after emergencies really mean that, you know, we're able to leverage that expertise and that local knowledge and really put people at the center and be able to show and demonstrate that between us, we're really covering the widest range of hazards. So having said that, based on our anticipatory action experiences over the last decade, we've seen several factors that enable anticipatory approaches amongst national societies. And we've heard some already, of course, from the previous speakers. Number one that was important for us was around the comprehensive policies and legislations. I think that, you know, we've got examples, Ecuador, Nepal, Red Cross societies. They've been working really closely with government authorities in the last year to institutionalize anticipation in national disaster risk management systems. Similarly, we've seen in the Philippines, the National Society there has worked closely with government and really looking at amending legislations to enable disbursement of funds prior to the disaster occurring. So having that embedded in policy and legislation is number one for us. Number two is about the partnerships at the local and national level. Of course, that won't surprise you. Might surprise somebody, I don't know. Of course, it won't surprise you. I'm really making sure that anticipation is based on this reliable forecast, the data that we heard about earlier, the communication of the early warning, the delivery of early action, and understanding that none of this knowledge is held by one agency in particular, and the coming together of that jigsaw in a very coordinated fashion on the ground and really respecting and working alongside all the actors on the ground is absolutely key. We see that in our own experiences, the Red Cross and Red Crescent National Societies have been a critical link to connecting the hydrometeorological services and national disaster management agencies to deliver effective anticipatory action. And number three, coming back to the point that I think has been mentioned twice already, the financing piece. Financing for anticipatory action, really, it must not only increase overall, but I'll go further than that. And I'll say that we really need to make sure that access is available. Access for systems building, for capacity strengthening, that allows us to include activities such as equipping local disaster response teams, stocking warehouses, and establishing concrete decision-making and clear roles and responsibilities. This, in our mind, really drives the future for communities to be at the heart of anticipatory action. Thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. And actually, you already did a part of the work for me, because you talk about the integration of anticipatory action in national disaster risk management. And we have here Dr. Vianti Jalante, Assistant Director for Disaster Management Division of ASEAN. Of course, ASEAN and its member states are working with national societies, and this is a joint collective agenda. What is your perspective on this integration, Vianti? And of course, the report itself, its connection with the report.
Yes, thank you very much, Cara. So esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, so good afternoon. On behalf of the ASEAN Secretariat and also the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, we would like to express, of course, our sincere appreciation for the Anticipation Hub, German Red Cross, IFRC for organizing this event. So allow me to acknowledge the member of the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management who are also present in this room. So we have former chair of ACDM in 2022, ACDM Thailand. Welcome to stand up, please. Excellent. So ACDM Thailand was the chair which championed the issuance of the ASEAN framework on anticipatory action in disaster management, which was so this publication which we referred to in this document. So I would also like to extend our warmest congratulations on the Anticipation Hub. So let me share some of our thoughts with regard, what kind of lessons and issues that the ASEAN region can draw to highlight from this report. So as we know, anticipatory action is becoming critical approach in disaster management. In our region in Southeast Asia, anticipatory action is also gaining momentum. There has been significant approach or shift on how ASEAN tackle hazards in the region. So this year, ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management under the chairmanship of Vietnam has adopted this theme of from response to anticipatory action and resilience. So before it's about the response to resilience, now we include anticipatory action as part of our overall journey towards global leadership in disaster management. So adoption of this theme demonstrates ASEAN steadfast commitment in promoting and strengthening anticipatory action. Nonetheless, of course, there are still more to be done to ensure that anticipatory action is implemented throughout the region and also gets mainstream into our regional our disaster management activities. So allow me to share three things or three building blocks by which anticipatory action within our framework and how then the findings of this report relevant or show some of follow-up that needs to be done. So there are three building blocks of anticipatory action for ASEAN. So the first one on risk information, forecasting, and early warning system. Here, my representative from the ASEAN Humanitarian AHA Center, also stand up, please, if you can. Yes. So they have been working, supporting ACDM in providing risk information, forecasting, and early warning system here. What we see, for example, on things that we need to do on this, strengthening this weather forecast, seasonal outlook, impact analysis, monitoring, and pre-disaster assessment. So for information, we are currently reviewing our early assessment of early warning system to allow for it to be more inclusive, end-to-end, and also multi-hazard. So having anticipatory action as with building blocks on this risk information will be very timely and allow us to then implement anticipatory action systematically. The second building blocks that we have in this framework is on planning, operations, and delivery. We have four major components here on provision of SOP, menus of potential anticipatory action activities, sectoral anticipatory action plan, and anticipatory action protocols in contingency plan. So what we have so far within ASEAN, we have established framework which allow also cross-sectoral coordination. So this existing ASEAN mechanism allows for that. So we can have this sectoral plans for anticipatory action. We have also reviewed how these anticipatory action protocols can be considered within the contingency plan, existing AJDRP, what we call. But of course, the issuance of this standard operating procedure is something that we see very clearly needs to be done within ASEAN. And then the last building blocks of the anticipatory framework for ASEAN is pre-arranged finance. So two things that we need to have: dedicated anticipatory funds in disaster, DRM budgets and contingency plans, and also disaster risk finance instruments to include anticipatory action and link it to anticipatory action triggers and protocols. We have at the moment the ASEAN Disaster Risk Finance and Insurance framework, which we can see very clearly on the need for integration of anticipatory action. And of course, also this anticipatory action triggers and protocol, this is very clearly something that we see also the need for us to have. So having said so, we see that out of the 35 countries shown in this report, ASEAN countries, Vietnam and Philippines have such a framework in place. We would like to see, of course, more governments, ASEAN member states to consider this framework at the national level. Also, one case study on the anticipatory action activities from Typhoon Noru, Vietnam. So this is also something that we would like to see, being scaled up and that at the regional level. So thank you very much on, allowing ASEAN to share our progress in anticipatory action. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yanti. And again, congratulations on the ASEAN framework. It's really also inspiring lessons and insights being taken by other regions. And before I move to the other region, Mr. Ahmed, may I also ask our online audience to continue asking questions, and also for those of you who have questions, we will have a Q&A for both online and in-person audience. Dr. Ahmed, we have talked about forecasts and predictability. And of course, again, the collaboration with national disaster management authorities that has been highlighted is very important, but definitely a role for forecasting is anticipatory action needs to be strengthened. And in your lens, looking at our report, what insights, reflections can you share?
Thank you very much, Cara. Let me also join colleagues in congratulating the Anticipation Hub for this great work. Particularly what I've seen in this report, I've got an advantage of reading it last night. I have to break that news. I think it shows who is doing what and where. I think that's very, very interesting. That's the starting point, I believe. In addition to that, I think I'm also surprised to see the biggest progress buy-in from quite a number of implementing partners. The challenges are also actually very much pinpointed. I can't share more, particularly issues to do with scaling, issues to do with coordination and so on. For IGAD, colleagues, I would like to report from the field. For the Horn of Africa, I think we all are aware, particularly since you are practitioners, we just concluded a 5 failed season of horrible droughts, which some are considering actually, is that going to be a new normal? Because that has never happened over the last at least 60, 70 years in the region. Immediately, as of maybe 2 weeks ago, now that has turned into flooding, extreme and extensive flooding in parts of Somalia, Ethiopia, and so on. So this is a type of, complex disasters that we're dealing with. Now this is compounded further by conflicts. I think you have heard about Sudan. That's how volatile this region is. Okay, so very protracted, also very compounding risks, which has a far-reaching impact. Looking at what we are doing at IGAD, I don't talk about IGAD, but ICPAC, the climate center of IGAD, is particularly we do forecast, seasonal, monthly, but weekly forecast also. The current trends or understanding that we are having is how can we advance from weather forecasting to impact forecasting or impacted forecasts. That really gives us a very good understanding of what to expect, what to anticipate in more practical terms. So that is, I think, where our head and the heart is at the moment. All AI, machine learning, and so on, experts are in-house now at the moment working on how we can transition and advance the forecast. I know some are worried about particularly the false alarms and so on, but colleagues, practically speaking, why, for example, as IGAD, we like this approach of anticipation, anticipatory actions, early actions, is because if the forecast materializes, we avert a risk. If not, we contribute to community resilience. I think it can be designed in that way than a neck-breaking humanitarian aid, which has been the reality for Africa, particularly over the last several decades. So that is, I think, the great potential we see about so many countries, 35 countries, getting to know anticipatory actions. Cara, coming to the challenge, I think the key is, okay, there are pilots. I don't want to be pessimistic, but let me share with you. They say pilots never fail, but also never scale. I'm not sure if that's true. There is a truth, I think, in that. Don't take my words, but particularly scaling doesn't just mean, doing it in a bigger geography, but rather making it a norm, making it a modus operandi, for example, for governments, for local governments, regional governments, and so on. So that is, I think, what's at stake, and that's what it takes now for us to be able to effectively say, effectively transition from, the business as usual, more of, as I said, neck-breaking humanitarian aid assistance to more of building community resilience and advancing and averting actually the climate crisis or the impacts of the climate crisis. Having said this, we have also have a draft regional roadmap, which is very much similar to also the ASEAN sister framework, which was launched last year. But critically, we have looked at three things. One is how can we improve the forecast? Forecasts are always probabilities for us. For example, I think this time around March, April, May, we have got several locations wrong. We looked at global, centers, all are involved, but that is how the forecast is. Sometimes there are always uncertainties. If you see the probability, there are always uncertainties. But as I said, in the design level, there are things that can be changing. So improving forecast, a good, also, I think project coming with WFP is also enhancing forecasts using machine learning and so on, which will be, I think, launched soon. So that sort of activities, that sort of advancing tools, systems, models to try to get the forecast right is one. The second one is also in terms of regional, as intergovernmental body, we're also trying to assist countries if they can make some smaller steps towards transitioning from more of a reactive approaches to anticipation. Particularly the early action bit is what's lacking for different reasons. Sometimes not just for convenience that countries are not acting, but it requires quite a lot of resources, colleagues, and it requires a set of skills, institutional skills and capacities that need to be in place. And finally, we are also have identified in the roadmap a set of anticipatory actions with different scenarios. As we speak, IGAD and ICPAC is collaborating with partners in trying to set thresholds and triggers for different hazard scenarios in parts of Uganda, in parts of Kenya, and also partly in Djibouti. This is, I think, the niche where such regional institutions like ICPAC can advance, setting the thresholds and triggers so that we act based on in anticipation rather than always dealing with the crisis. In conclusion, particularly to the person that Kara asked, this report, the fundamental bit of it is, I think we have seen the bigger picture. To be honest, I've also learned that some of our member states, which I have never heard that they have a framework, I just studied, I just learned they have a framework. So I think that's also an indication of a bit of the challenge which is mentioned, coordination, quite a number of actors, but also doing it in different parts of the world. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, not only for your insight, but also for your slogan about scale. I think I will use that also in my in other opportunities to talk about scale. Again, I think it's really worth to highlight that what we are measuring here or reporting here on the report is on reach, on numbers, but mind shift is another issue. And now I'd like to move on to Mr. Imrul Kais Murizama from SKS Foundation, Bangladesh, Deputy Chief. Mr. Imrul, we talked about local action, enabling local action. I think it would be really good to see your reflection on the report, particularly vice versa. What is actually being brought or the value of working with local actors? Because I know that you have worked on developing anticipatory action in your organizations, and where are still the gaps looking at the report?
Thank you, Kara. In fact, I mean, to implement this anticipatory action, I mean, ultimately it is the local actor who actually deliver things on the ground. So the role of local actors is almost unavoidable in the journey. As a local actor, because I represent a mid-sized NGO in Bangladesh as a member of the Start Fund Bangladesh, and having opportunity to involve in anticipatory actions, we have implemented some anticipatory action of the UN agencies, particularly WFP, UNICEF, UNDP, And very recently, under risk financing, Start Fund Bangladesh, we have been involved in the anticipatory action. The advantage is most of the local actors are actually locally rooted. They are close to the community. So they understand better the needs and priorities of the community and the affected people. And we are very happy that for the first time, I mean, this because of the Start Fund Bangladesh, we were invited in the contingency planning, direct involvement in the contingency planning. So it's a great opportunity for the local actors to be involved in the planning process, which actually creates opportunity for us to involve the affected people and the community in the planning process as well. So that was the kind of opportunity we had very recently, and it was a great pleasure for us to be involved in this kind of exercises, which actually is a testimony of the capacity of the local actors, even in contributing in the planning process to come up with a more realistic planning for anticipatory action. Not only that, I mean, we enable a very reaching out the affected people and community faster. There is no other mechanism that can reach out to the community faster than the local actors, and lot of wide range of involvement in the decision-making process. We have also been talking about this local level coordination. I mean, when we are implementing this anticipatory action, local level coordination is very important, because it's not only the local actors who is delivering and the donor who is providing the financing, but there are also other actors, the local government actors. There are also the government line agencies. Because of the multi-sectoral engagement, there are different line ministries and agencies active. We need to coordinate with them, and that's a great opportunity, and the local actors best place to do the local level coordination more effectively than anybody else. And of course, when we talk about the cost effectiveness of the action, then I mean, this is actually the local actors' involvement actually open up the space for more effective and cost-effective and time-effective implementation of the actor. What we have experienced from our own organization, that's the kind of thing. And I should also mention one more advantage. I mean, when it comes to multi-sectoral action, the anticipatory action, I mean, it is more convenient for local actors to address. I mean, we can implement multi-sectoral action with one local actors because of their multi-sectoral involvement in regular program. So that's a kind of synergy that you can solve multiple purposes with one actor, that kind of thing. But at the same time, there are also challenges we face as a local actor, because direct fund accessing the fund is difficult. I mean, we don't get. And another difficulties we also face when the demand is very high. Because when the demand is very high and the financing is limited, so we struggle a lot, because it's the same community. If 500 people is affected, and if you have the capacity and we have the plan to respond to only half of the people, then it is a problem. I mean, we struggle with that. Apart from that, there are also local political influences, especially in the context of Bangladesh. The local political, it's really very difficult to avoid the local political interference in the action, in the implementation plan. So that also make our life very complicated. And also the due diligence issues. I mean, because for some of the financing, I mean, the financing comes with very tough financing conditions where many local actors actually fail to meet the compliances, the due diligence kind of thing. So I think that's an area where we need to think about and do more investment in make. Don't say that this is a capacity gap of the local actors, but I would say these are institutional shortfalls in terms of due diligence kind of thing that also need to be taken care of. I think I should stop with this.
Thank you, Mr. Imro. I think this is just right next to my next point that I want to ask Caroline again. The need to invest for local actors, in local actors. Caroline, we know that there's this big initiative called the Early Warning for All initiative launched by the UN Secretary General last year, aiming to cover the whole world with early warning systems, which we hope will lead to earlier anticipatory action. Again, coming to these issues of investments gaps in the local actors. And we heard also there's not necessarily a consensus whether few that is for implementation and build money for systems building capacity. Different organizations have different take on what needs to be increased. I think it would be really good. I know that IFRC is the pillar lead for the response pillar of this early warning initiative. What's your take? What's the perspective of IFRC on this?
Thanks, Cara. Yeah. Well, the early warnings for all, I mean, it's a huge thing. It's something that we're very proud to be part of, I think, as the only non-UN led pillar, and really reflecting the work of local actors and national actors as we do. I think it's a real opportunity for us to bring that voice and to really make sure that voice is represented in such an initiative. We, again, going back to partnerships, we see this as a collective journey. There are ambitious targets. When your target is to cover the whole world, it's pretty ambitious, and I think it obviously will require some very strong coordination and some really determined efforts to make that happen, both from an perspective, from a community perspective, but also from a donor perspective as well. But it's not just about having the warnings there, is it? It's about making sure that, as you say, that they do translate into early action. And then I guess the ultimate benchmark won't just be, do we cover the world? It will be going back to what you said around, measuring impact and making sure that we're able to save lives through these actions. So to come back to the point that I used actually when I answered the previous question and partnerships, we really need to make sure that first and foremost, it's people that are at the center of this, that we really use a whole of society approach, and we bring together all the key national level stakeholders, be that government, be that academia, be that the private sector, but obviously with local communities and local voices at the heart of that. We've got to make sure that this early warning for all doesn't just remain an initiative that sits in rooms like this, to be quite honest, and really with, a discussion point. It really has to dive deep to country level and above all to local level, not just country level, not just national, but really at community level. We know that these are the people on the front line of disasters, and these are the ones who are really experiencing this, and where the demands for us to act are the greatest. So we have to, and we are obliged, we should respond to that. Those of you that have been following this will be aware that there are 30 countries that have now been identified in the initial cohort. We, from our part, leading on pillar 4, which is around preparedness, we're looking at working, of course, through member national societies, Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies, and really facilitating that engagement with local level actors and communities, making sure that we are collaborating as extensively as we can. So collaboration will really drive this action on the ground. We know that there are some major funding mechanisms out there. There has been some strong talk and discussion around that, both from the Cruise Initiative, from the Green Climate Fund. But I think, and as you alluded to, accessing that for local agencies, local actors, even for ourselves to access that. Unless you're accredited, then it's not necessarily available for you to dip into. So we need to make sure, and this is really a call to make sure that that funding is accessible to all, and that really we're donors are supporting this and really opening up and reducing the barriers to national and local actors accessing. So we're going to be looking at exploring a range of potential funding sources on behalf of our local actors, of course, National Red Cross and Red Crescent. We are looking at new sources. We're hoping that this won't just be a transfer of existing funding, but it will actually generate new funding in a more sustainable way, and really look at how we can scale this up and do this in an integrated fashion. Just as an example, we're already working, the IFRC, the Netherlands Red Cross, the Red Cross Climate Centre, WMO, UNDRR, we're already working on an initiative called Water at the Heart of Climate Action, which is an example in 4 particular contexts of how we can use early warning, early action to really demonstrate the principles that we hope will be replicated on a global level through this early warning for all. I mean, you know, what more to say? Unless we speak up, unless we really drive this, and unless we really push for this to happen at local and community level, it won't. It will remain in conference centres like this. And I think that we all have an obligation to drive that down to the community level as much as possible.
Thank you, Caroline. So we are now just 15 minutes from closing, and I would like to give the audience, of course, a Q&A. So if I may ask for our speakers to maybe shorten the answer, that would be really great. Now we come to you back, Dr. Rianti, again. It's amazing, and the building blocks, it's a really concrete guidance on how governments could work on anticipatory action. It would be really good for now, looking into the future, what call do you have for partners, governments, and donors to support the scale up of anticipatory action?
So thank you very much. So we would allow us to share 3 critical enablers to help scale up anticipatory action in ASEAN, and also possibly relevant to other regions as well. So first of all, on leadership and direction at the regional level. So the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, so 10 NDMOs of the ASEAN member states is the sector body that leads disaster management efforts in ASEAN community. So in our case, guidance from the ACDM emphasized the need for more proactive approach in disaster management. So our commitment to reflect anticipatory action has been reflected in the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response Work Plan 2021-2025. So we have already established these guiding documents, and of course, the ASEAN Framework on Anticipatory Action. Then this guidance then would be then, you know, implemented, a recommendation for implementation at the national level. Another second issue that we see critical would be, of course, commitment to implement these 3 building blocks in our framework. As I have shared before, risk information, early warning, planning, operation and delivery, and pre-arranged finance. We have some established mechanisms, for example, on the role of AHA Center for working on disaster monitoring and response system. They have disaster information network, ADINET, to improve risk analysis and early warning system. That's already available, but of course, we still needed to do more. We identified the gap on trigger mechanism, SOPs, and of course, anticipatory action fundings. The third and critical enablers for us would be cooperation with other sectors. Fortunately, within the ASEAN mechanisms, we have this available. So we have technical working group on PGI, protection, gender inclusion, technical working group on civil and military coordination. We have ASEAN Disaster Resilience Platform, by which 12 sectoral bodies within ASEAN and AHA Center, you know, cooperate and discuss and share. And this is where we know that anticipatory action needs, you know, inputs and cooperation from different sectors: health, finance, environment, banking system, social welfare, and we have this mechanism, but of course then it will then lead to the implementation at the national level, which also then calls for this cross-sectoral engagement and even at the local level. So importance of cooperation, we have outlined that in the ASEAN Vision 2025 on disaster management. We of course acknowledge the strong cooperation with dialogue partners, multi-development partners, financing institution, think tank, and academia, and we have this mechanism. So let's start to do more. So finally, before I end my intervention, I would also like to use this opportunity to for the participant to that ASEAN is organizing the ASEAN Disaster Management Week. So think of HNPW or global platform, but for ASEAN. So we will have events such as interregional dialogue on resilience, which then provide avenue for non-stakeholder participation on discussing disaster resilience in the region. This is where, of course, invitation for anticipation hub and also participants in the room to attend our event. So thank you very much, Kara, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Yanti. Again, really about bringing everyone together. And now I want to go to Dr. Ahmed about bringing everyone together. What opportunities you think is quite immediate that we should grab, especially when it comes to the collaboration between the humanitarian and hydromet sectors, and how can we support?
I think I would say, Kara, two things. One is particularly at a national level, we have opportunities where we have mechanisms, particularly, those cross-sectoral mechanisms from hydromet all are involved. I think those mechanisms need to be strengthened. I think that is very key to win the heart and minds of particularly governments to adopt and make that transition. The second one is also from partner side. I think we shouldn't expect governments just to allocate or pre-finance disasters, particularly where resources are in highest competition, let's say, with conflicts, security, and so on. So I would say that donor partners can really lead the way by showing the evidence, by showing the return in investment of anticipation and anticipatory actions vis-a-vis the humanitarian emergency response, which is, to be honest, a vicious cycle. If it has to be broken, then there must be a shift. So that is, I think, the sort of narratives that can bring governments, but also non-state actors together. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ahmed. And Mr. Imro, the last is you, again, bringing in bringing better access to local actors on anticipatory action. Can you share the outlook for START Network around your plans?
In fact, I mean, the START Network is the pilot initiative that they have initiated in Bangladesh in 2017 is actually a pilot of an innovative, locally driven financing mechanism to response, where in fact the whole mechanism is actually locally driven. I mean, the entire decision-making process is done locally. The members who are a member of the Start Fund Bangladesh, actually, they are widely involved in the decision-making process. The whole governance is actually represented by the members, and the entire program is operated by the members. So that has created a lot of encouragement to the members, because some of the members, even if they are not getting any funding to implement any anticipatory action, but it is according to their view. I mean, it is not all about funding. I mean, the kind of role and responsibility they are getting in decision making is also actually giving them a kind of confidence and actually upgrading their satisfaction as a contributor in anticipatory action kind of thing. But one of the concerns, I mean, particularly from our experience, what we have seen, which is also preventing the local access is also some constraints. The internal cost recovery of the local actors is seriously undermined. So that is one of the issues that this will prevent. And secondly, I mean, we have been talking because the report also unveiled about the framework and the number. It's also very, I mean, we need to be cautious about the numbers. If there are 70 frameworks covering 15 different hazards, I mean, it might complicate the journey at some point in time. Because, I mean, with too many frameworks, actually, the work will disappear and the frame will remain. So I think, I mean, because in fact, we all are approaching the same objective, but in a different ways. When it goes to the same community with a different framework and different approach, I mean, this might complicate the implementation of the process because the other actors who needs to be involved will be confused with so many different approaches. So I think there is a need for a coordinated, call for a more coordinated approach with greater space for participation of the people and community that needs to be ensured. And at the same time, I mean, given the experience of Bangladesh, where cyclone and flood is very recurring, and it's an every regular event, and people are mostly affected by these two events, and also drought and river erosion is there. But these are all linked, increasingly linked to climate change. So the anticipatory action has to factor in the climate change issues, if at least from a sustainability point of view. Climate resilient action has to be worked out. I mean, has to be factored in. I mean, this is a time to think about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, coordination needs to happen really at the different levels for anticipatory action to work. We are just actually 5 minutes before finish. I think I'd like to take still 2 or 3 questions from the audience and online before we close, taking the advantage of our panelists being here with the diverse insights and experiences. And maybe I can call on Julia Wittig from OCHA to sit in case there are questions for OCHA to the panel, to join the panel. Anyone wants to have questions? Maybe we can take a round and then we can ask the panelists to respond. Or the online questions. Yeah, if the in-person we don't hear yet, Tim Woods, my colleague, can speak from the online participants.
Sure, I can read out one of the questions we have online, which reads to the report.
Sorry, Tim, can you get closer to the mic?
Is that better? Ah, yeah, that's better, sorry. So this is a question from Hannes Soroki from NOAA. And it says, do the numbers in the report only refer to anticipatory action under the G7 definition, such as trigger-based or automated systems? Or have you also considered forecasts based on non-automated systems, such as the START Fund's anticipation activations?
Anything else? Maybe we can take a few and then we can make sure whoever is able to answer can answer. Yes, please, I first see.
Hi, I'm Ben Noble, Interagency Coordinator for the ISC Task Force 2 on accountability to affected people. My question or comments is that I do see quite a lot of investments in the cash aspect of this for anticipatory action. I also know that in Asia, for instance, the regional working group has made efforts to do cash plus and look at those. And to what extent in the cycle of consultations that we have with communities to do those SOPs, do we look into and the protocols, do we look into non-cash solutions to the extent that we're less supply driven and a little bit more people centered? So that's for everyone. But I know in Bangladesh it was the case And I give one livable example, which is a lot of times with disaster, people complain that they lost their cattle. And, you know, you've evacuated me, but I've lost my cattle. And then I will get free food, you know, for a little bit. That's not great. That's not what I wanted. So just as an example of that, I know there's other cases where, you know, there's grain storage, you know, putting cattle to safety and things like that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the first question, maybe I can ask Nico to answer, and for the second question on cash, I don't know who in the panel would like to answer the question, but maybe we can start with you, Nico.
Okay, so when I understand correctly, the question was if we included also non-automatic system approaches for anticipatory action, and the answer is yes, we did actually. So we basically integrated all anticipatory action approaches that have, you know, some sort of structured arrangement in place where a forecast leads to an action. And it's true, like for instance, the START network and also FAO, they're a bit more flexible in their approach, but they're still acting on the basis of a forecast, and there's a structured arrangement in place for the agencies to act ahead. And I see also the colleagues are here, of course, in the room. They can tell report about that in more detail. But the answer is yes. So we embraced a broad definition.
Yeah, just with regard to your point about the loss of livelihood assets, we involved the insurance company in one of the anticipatory actions. We involved especially for agriculture, because the agricultural products, especially the paddy, those are flooded. I mean, they are lost. I mean, the insurance premium was paid by the action. So, and the farmer who lost their produce in the field because of flooding, I mean, they were compensated by the insurance company. So that was the cost-effective way of actually addressing this livelihood asset recovery kind of thing. So that was one example that we used last time.
Okay, great. I think, unfortunately, we have run out of time. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to our audience. I would like to call Dominique Bourgeon from FAO, Director from the Geneva office. FAO is also advisory group of the Anticipation Hub and also one of the members of the Anticipatory Action Task Force. Over to you, Dominique.
Well, thank you very much. It's always difficult to come at the end of such a rich panel, but thank you indeed for inviting me to say a few words. And I would really like to start by congratulating you, the Anticipation Hub, and all members, all panelists for a great interaction today. The report also, I think, is truly inspiring. This is the beginning. This is first time we have this report. So I think it's also, I also heard a call for feeding information. You need information because the forthcoming report will be as good as the quality of information that is fed, and that will enable us to further build on what we have achieved, but also there are lessons, but also recommendations for the way forward. And I think this is really critical. We had also excellent examples of very good partnership that were provided by the panelists, and it's clear that we want to see more of that moving forward. I think what I really like is that we were also very much reminded of the importance of local actors and local actors coordination, which is indeed at the very heart of achieving impact, which is at the end what we want. Well, at FAO, we've been embarking into this journey of anticipatory action right from the beginning. I mean, we were with you all, working with you, believing in anticipatory action, which is really at the center of the FAO strategic framework. No, this is a way of working for us, and why? Because we feel we first and foremost owe it to those at risk, but we also owe it to the taxpayers who support humanitarian action, and we have very much documented those return on investment, and the business case is there. We need to do it. I think what I heard today, I like this pilot never fail, but never scale. And this is a challenge. This is a challenge we are indeed facing in this area of anticipatory action. I mean, no, I was glad to see the level of funding that is indeed increasing, but a big challenge for us moving forward is to move from piloting to at-scale response, because it's only if we go at scale that we are going to be able to show real impact, the impact that the people at the end need. We need to continue making anticipatory action a systematic modus operandi to mitigate humanitarian impact. We need to continue to work with government on early warning, building on early warning systems, but also helping setting them up when they are not there. And the early warning for all initiative in that respect is very much important. I also like the point of ICPAC, Dr. Ahmed colleague, on the importance of weather forecast, but also the impact forecast, which I think is something important we need to consider moving forward. We also must take action, take a coordinated approach to set up harmonized financing for anticipatory action. Adequate financing must come from humanitarian, climate, and development funding sources. We think this is absolutely critical, and the financial resources are needed both for implementation as well as, importantly, also for the technical and operational capacities to make it happen. So again, a particular thank to our colleague from the region, from ASEAN, ICPAC, also from the colleague from Bangladesh for his great remarks. We need to continue supporting institutionalization of anticipatory, all the difficult words, of anticipatory action. This is obviously very important. So as was said, there has been anticipatory action is definitely a common feature of many of the events that are taking place this week. There will be more in the coming days, and it shows the importance. It shows that it is something we all believe in, and so I believe there will be other fruitful discussions. Let us work in support of this anticipatory action report, which is critical as a sort of we have the baseline. Now let us monitor progress. Let us see how we move towards achieving our common goal. And well, I wish you a good evening and fruitful deliberation this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique, for helping us. For helping us eloquently close this session. And unfortunately, we didn't have the time to show you the nice global map that will capture all this data and put it online, update it regularly. And Dominique has already helped us call for more data and more information. We are sure we are not covering all the implementation out there. So if you know of any, please let us know. And again, there are still a lot of exciting opportunities for this week. Many sessions organized by Anticipatory Action Task Force, the Hub. They're all on our website. And if you have great ideas and curious about the different working groups that was mentioned, we will be tomorrow here at 11 to 12:30 to talk about collaboration opportunities. And thank you again to our panelists and Nico for really the great report summary and the insights shared today. And thank you for staying despite of us finishing a bit late. Thank you. And on your way out, you are most welcome to pick up the report, the printed version. It's next to the door. Thank you. And to our panelists, we have a request of taking pictures. And Dominique,